Hello beautiful friends, welcome to my channel. I'm really glad you're here. In today's video, I'll share with you all one strategy I have found for connecting with the world around me as an extension of myself, to break down the all-encompassing existence of things into a smaller, more conceptually manageable form of thought. And at the end of this video, I'll leave you with a meditative phrase you can connect to your breath to help ground you in a self-understanding that goes beyond the limits of your own body and mind. Also, this video is an extension of the ideas explored in Tuesday's video regarding gender, and will apply those to life more generally. So if you missed Tuesday's video, I encourage you to give it a watch, either by clicking the tag above or at the end of this video. So, in many of our recent videos, we've been exploring the limits of the self, how cultures of self-help and self-care are often heavily intertwined with consumerist capitalism, and perpetuate ideas of individual healing over collective equity and interconnectedness. And we should strive to course correct the hyper-individualism of our society by preserving multiple perspectives, holding nuanced narratives, protecting diversity without promoting division, and reminding ourselves of our shared realities as much as our individual ones. Many religions and philosophies have sought to do precisely this by eliminating the idea of the self altogether, to meditate or use psychedelics or other means to recognize and internalize the way in which there is no difference between ourselves and our environment. The trouble I feel personally with eliminating the self is twofold. First, even while I have had experiences which make me forget myself, where I recognize that the boundaries I accept for my body are in fact quite porous and fluid, these recognitions always fade. While I meditate regularly and attempt to stay connected to this reality, it is a difficult, if not impossible, state to preserve in the midst of such hyper-stimulus and individualism. The difficulty of sustaining such a frame of mind does not diminish its value or importance for me, but I am in pursuit of frames of mind which can be reasonably sustainable given the context of my and our lives. So I love meditating and encourage everyone to do it. But for better or worse, I personally cannot seem to sustain my meditative state every waking moment. And second, even if I could maintain a state of porosity every moment of every day, I'm not sure it's actually the best or highest state I could be living in. For better or worse, we are solipsistic beings, which means that anything we can know or perceive about the world is perceived first and foremost through the self. I don't believe our perceptions of self should remain uninterrogated, but even if we can imagine a possible future where we can relinquish our self-interests in favor of equitable social harmony, we don't reside there now. And I suspect that, for most of us, the idea of a constant state of ego death is unviable and unsustainable. Exponentially so when participation in and interaction with society as it is currently organized insists on continually reasserting oneself via processes of ownership and identity. In plain English, while we are all quite literally a part of the same interconnected whole, we experience ourselves somewhat non-negotiably as individuals. This is not something I believe we need to entirely undo, but is something we should learn to better measure the consequences of, and work to balance with collective understandings and a pursuit of wellness that cares for everything and everyone, rather than staying on the frantic, endless treadmill of unhindered self-interest. But how do we accomplish this when we have so many things vying for our time, attention, finances, and selves? How do we move beyond thinking about ourselves as a self? For me, one solution resides in approaching the self in a similar manner to the way in which I approach gender. Namely, by recognizing that both the self and gender are socially constructed, a result of our collective lens, but they are also some of the most materially consequential realities with which we engage. This is not uniquely true of gender or selfhood. I believe it applies to almost any facet of identity, which is not to deny our differences, but to once again encourage us to neither erase our differences nor divide our communities or resources or access because of them. And in the same way that I proposed in my last video, that we break apart the mega machine of gender by parsing its script into smaller pieces, I believe a similar process is possible within our sense of self. I think of this process of self-reflection via the borrowed term ecological self, which originated with the idea of deep ecology. I have mixed feelings about deep ecology, which is perhaps a topic for another video, but I was introduced to the idea of the ecological self by way of a book of poetry and invocations for honoring the earth. Regardless, the value of the idea for me manifests by imagining where the cells of my body were, or might have been, before I was me, and by looking at nature closely and creatively in an attempt to recognize myself in the world outside of my own body. I engage this practice twice daily, when I wake up in the morning and before I go to bed, and for me, it is as simple as a fill-in-the-blank phrase. I start with the words, "I see myself in," and end the phrase with a poetic, literal, scientific, whatever description of something in the natural world which I can identify with. Not as a means of inflating my own ego, but as a means of diminishing it, of recognizing myself in the uniqueness of the world, or perhaps recognizing that the uniqueness of the world includes me, envelops me. Rather than trying to obliterate any conception of myself in a single moment, I'm working to expand the boundaries of my body, to recognize that I came from the earth and one day will die, as all of us will, and will return to the earth. The matter which I call Joss right now, yesterday was a carrot, and tomorrow will be dust. And the circle of life, or the cycle of interconnectedness, the spirit of transformation, or resurrection, or reincarnation, or whatever you want to call it, is one of the surest, most observable phenomenon which we can see in the world around us. But we spend so much time attempting to escape or ignore it that we forget how porous, how fluid, how ephemeral ourselves and our bodies really are. I am not suggesting this is easy, nor am I suggesting that the terms we use to describe it have the same consequences or effects. That is, I'm not trying to collapse every unique religion or philosophy into a single smorgasbord and call it a unified frame of mind. I am simply trying to note the similarities across many so-called spiritual observations, and to call attention to the truth of these spiritual or theological realities as something which is accessible without belief in spirituality or the divine as such. That everything is interconnected is a scientific fact. What we do with that fact and how we incorporate it into our lives is what is often termed religious or spiritual. But we cannot even begin to have healthy or mutually respectful conversations about our differences in spirituality or much of anything if we do not first become more in tune with our own porosity, with the boundaries of our lives and our bodies, and begin to recognize ourselves in things outside of our own self. But today's video was a bit more dense, so I'll leave you with a meditative phrase you can connect to your breath to help connect you to the truth of your ecological self, to the porosity of your being, when your ego is all you can hear and feel. And it goes like this. So on the inhale, think to yourself, I see myself. And on the exhale, everywhere in the world, I see myself. Everywhere in the world. I see myself everywhere in the world. If you're feeling brave and vulnerable enough to share any response you had to today's reflection, I would love to hear from you in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video or it meant something to you, please like and subscribe. Your support means a great deal to me as I want to provide reflections which speak to you. And thank you for watching. I wish you peace and perspective. I love you all as I love myself, as we are part of the same world. And I look forward to talking with you again soon.